Thanks, Aqua. Thanks everyone for being here. Good to see some folks who were here. If you were here, please help fill in gaps with this, as well as new folks. You know, one of the challenges in this collective work, being from so many different entities, is calendars and schedules. So it's great to be together as we can. Even better to have more. So I took some notes as we went yesterday, so I'll highlight a few things for today. We started off, did some introductions like this, but we got expectations for this summit from the group, and included in the list that we documented were focus and clarity around the work of our MAPI. Folks want to leave with action steps to move the work forward. A sense of urgency and discomfort. We feel like that's critical to get to action. A strategic outlook, an understanding of how we fit in. Some are looking for that understanding of how they fit into the RMAPI work. A renewed and clear call to action for RMAPI. Alignment to a shared goal. And then finally, more connection in the work. There's a sense that there's a lot of individual organizations doing work related to anti-poverty, but we are divided in the community. So we're looking for more connection in the work that we're doing. So that was the set of expectations we agreed to and shared. Then Aqua did a recap of the principles of collective impact. For us, and great job, Aqua. Sounded like a collective impact scholar in that, right? And then said, as she just described, we're in the midst of a mission to develop a unity agenda. So we had a common agenda, we're renewing it and also changing the name, the unity agenda. And the principle of a unity agenda is to emphasize the sense of it's not just a document we're creating. We're really going to go through a process and, yes, engage the steering committee and the working groups, but also engage people with lived experience, engage our networks. And the idea is to build this agenda that has one is a living document, but ongoing buy-in for multiple levels of our community. And that unity agenda will be documented and shared in the fall of this year. So we're in the process of putting that together. A lot of the input we're putting in today will add to that. Then we had the privilege of hearing from some of our scholars and intellectuals in the community, some many TED Talks. Shout out to our institutions of higher learning. We had, and if you have your flyer here, we had Ted Forsyth from RIT's Department of Criminal Justice, Dr. Marlo Washington from St. John Fisher, and Dr. April Aycock. Also shout out to Monroe County for providing that expertise. We had some really engaging TED Talks. So we broke up in groups and went in different orders. So I'll report back in the orders, just some highlights in the orders that I attended it. So I started with the Beyond the Headlines, Poverty and Crime with Dr. Forsyth. The bottom line there is that whereas we generally associate crime with poverty in certain neighborhoods, there's no reason that those have to be aligned and associated together. In fact, it's the legacy of redlining largely and related things that have driven that association in our experience. One just particular specific theme that I took away that, Dr. Forsyth talked about applying in, what can make the difference? When are there communities that might have poverty but not have the same challenges of crime? Those communities exhibit what they call collective efficacy. So that is when parents and grandparents are looking out for young people, regardless if they're their children, and there's a sense of beyond needing to call the police or just kind of being fearful in your homes, that there's that shared efficacy to really kind of manifest the conditions that you want in your community. Dr. Forsyth astutely compared that to collective impact as well, right? For us as a network, we want to increase our collective efficacy, in this case, to move the needle on poverty. So I thought that was a good theme. From Dr. Washington, his talk was about leading towards race equity, and Marlo did a good job of doing an authentic dugout talk. So it was like no PowerPoint presentations in the dugout, no, so he just kind of circled up some chairs and had a real frank conversation. Let me see, and he had some gems I want to capture, but the main theme, and there it is, that Dr. Washington talked about is if we really want to make progress towards equity, it was really about engaging community. And he said we need to design the hospitable table as our MAPI. If we want to authentically engage community, not just have a few people at a meeting here or there, but if we really want the engagement, a mutually beneficial experience that engages community, we have to do the work to design a hospitable table that invites, that engages, that empowers those individuals. I think it was a quote, maybe it's from Dr. John Powell, that poverty isn't the lack of money, it's the lack of power. And so he challenged our MAPI to create a hospitable table that authentically shares power with community. And finally, Dr. April Aycock and her talk was focused on racialized trauma and equity. I have to shout out Dr. Aycock. I hadn't met her before. She did a great job of speaking from her personal experience. It was extremely moving, her personal lived experience and challenges, as well as, in her case, the resilience. She's obviously done well, and she specifically cited that community embraced her and supported her when those resources weren't necessarily there in her own household. Again, pointing to an opportunity that we have as our MAPI to help many more young people do better, not just be dependent on whatever resources are in their household, but can we create networks and support systems beyond individual households to add to the value for our children and young people in the community. So yeah, I'll stop there. Anything, Vernon, anyone else was here want to add to that section? We had another thing, but before we lose it, if there's anything I missed, if not, I'll move on. Okay, Jennifer.
Marlo made the point that community development is done with, and it's based on assets
Right.
of people that you're working with, and that's a model that we might look at as something instead of serving people for their problems.
That's right. Great point. That was another great